So hey everyone, and welcome to a very special video on my channel. Today I'm joined by independent tabletop game designer Ellie Dix. Thank you so
Hi.
much for being here, Ellie.
No, you're welcome. It's lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So Ellie is a game designer, author, and now podcast host with her newly launched podcast Behind the Cardboard. She's been named by Mojo Nation as one of the top 100 most influential people working in toy and game design. Her game submission won the 2023 Hasbro Women Innovators of Play contest, and her blog on her website, thedarkimp.com, has been awarded Best Board Game Design Blog by Cardboard Edits in the past 2 years. So now, Ellie, can you please tell us just a little bit more about yourself and a brief overview of your journey as a game designer?
Sure. Well, I used to describe myself as an entrepreneur, and I thought when I came into game design full time that that's really what I wanted to do again within the board game industry. And so I started full time self-publishing, and I have my own website, thedarkimp.com, and you can find my self-published games there. And I kind of threw myself into this self-publishing journey with great gusto, and did all sorts of different games in different formats, which I find really interesting. So it's one of the things that kind of gets me excited and keeps me designing new things, like making games on coasters. Here is one in front of me. So the game's on one side and the rules are on the back. I like making games that can be shared easily, and games in formats that will hook people in that don't necessarily play. So I like the idea of putting these out in hotels and holiday rentals. And when I started the self-publishing, I was very much thinking down that line from a sort of entrepreneurial point of view. And kind of trying to make lots of connections with hotels, with all sorts of businesses that I thought might take these games. And the problem was that the design, I loved the design so much that I really just wanted to be doing that. And all the other things, I kind of had to force myself to do. So even though I ran a business before, and felt very much like that was who I was, a small business owner and somebody that can kind of put all these different bits together to make these things happen and get energy from that. I learned that really it was the design that was the thing that I wanted to do, that I could do for a long time. And so I started to burn out a bit with all of the self-publishing stuff and made the decision to say, okay, that's it. I'm going to draw a line under it. I'm just going to do design from now on, design development and nothing else. So I stopped self-publishing things. And now I design games which I pitch to publishers. I've had a bunch of things picked up by different publishers, a couple of hobby games, several mass market games. And you can see some of them. And that's what I'm doing going forward. So I'm very excited and happy to be doing this all the time now. And I think, from a sort of design perspective, I get energy from the invention of new games. I love coming up with the initial ideas and knocking them into a first prototype. I love kind of the cycle of playtesting and development and getting them a bit better and a bit better and a bit better. And then my interest wanes a little bit at the tail end, when you get into the, I've got it sort of 90% of the way there, and that card is probably a bit powerful, or then I'm bored by that stage. And so honestly, it's better for me to pitch to publishers because usually they have people who can do that development.
Right.
And if I get the idea working, I'm not that worried about whether all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and, that everything else is perfect. And that sometimes works to my advantage in terms of, I guess I'm I'm able to create more games than people who are very focused on the details. And sometimes it doesn't, because I'll get rejections from people that say, yeah, it was all great until we didn't have a proper end game, or something. Oh, yeah, well, these things happen. Yeah, so I think I'm also very much inspired by new mechanics, usually more so than theme, and new formats, which I said already are kind of particular interest and inspiration. And I love to do lots of different projects, so I like to work on lots of different things at the same time, so I can move from one game to another, and therefore I work on mainly light things that don't need so much development at the tail end. Yeah.
Yeah, those more in-depth strategy games definitely take up a lot more time, don't they?
Right. And I know I wrote a blog post about this a while back, with the analogy of scuba diving or snorkeling. And some people really like that deep dive of the scuba dive. They're going right down, they're focusing on one thing and they're doing it brilliantly. And it's the most amazingly intricate thing they put together, and it's a really deep dive on it. And other people, and I'm in this camp, like the sort of swimming around on the top and seeing a few things and then coming up and looking around. And it's very much a sort of more shallow dives into things, but it means that I can do lots of things at once. But yeah, games tend to be on the lighter side because of that.
And that can be, people may think that it's easier to do these more simple light games, but it is a real skill to cut things away and get to the core of the fun and streamline things that much. Yeah,
I agree. I think it's something you can practice and get better at. And sometimes people are just that way inclined. So I think I've always been, interested in the mechanic. What is the mechanic in this game?
Right.
That everything is based on. Can I create something around this one thing? And it's been, for me, I've found it hugely helpful to be part of a very vibrant weekly playtest group with a lot of experienced designers who are more experienced than me. And I've learned from those people and listened to when they say, this game, you need to throw 90% of it away, but that thing in the middle of it, that's really cool. You make a game about that, and then you've got something different. And so I feel that because I learned that early, to focus on the one thing that makes your game special, that I tend to do that as a matter of course. That's not to say that I don't, end up having games that have got too much, too many bits and pieces in them, but I'm more likely to have games that are far too stripped back and that aren't really a game at all. That are something that, okay, well, that was fun for 10 minutes. And, we've been a playtest recently. I'm doing a co-design with a friend of mine, and we're doing 12 different games that we're putting in a box. And they are designed to be the lightest possible games you could ever play. The idea is that you take them to a bar and that they're, that sort of length of rules, and that you can pull them out while you're drinking and learn them in 20 seconds and then play them. And the comments that are coming back on our shared playtesting document are, 3 of the 4 playtesters said this isn't a game. I'm like, that's okay, because they might not be, that one might not be a game, but also they might not be approaching this in the way that we're expecting our audience to approach it. So,
right, exactly. Keeping the target audience in mind is very key for those types of things.
Yeah.
And you mentioned just how many different projects you have going on. When I went to your website, I was just like, there's so many cool things on the go, and you're so busy. It's truly amazing. Yeah, you have P&P games that people could just print off and play. You pitch games. You also consult. You do a lot of different things. How do you manage so many different projects?
I am naturally organized. And that is a bit of a superpower, I think. You know, I'm quite disciplined. I'm very self-motivated. I've worked for myself for almost forever. And so I'm definitely into a habit of being self-motivated and self-driven. And that helps. You know, there's no two ways about it. Some people are organized and some people aren't as organized, and the people who are more organized are going to find it easier to juggle multiple things. I never try and do two things at once. I map out my days quite frequently. I'm pretty realistic about how long things are going to take. I don't kind of leave things until the last minute. If I've got a deadline, I prefer to work on them much earlier. And those sorts of skills are really hard to learn for people who, you know, because it's a kind of natural thing, I think, you know, and it comes over many years of just that sort of self-discipline. And I know that it is hugely helpful. I have different things, like, you know, I've got a list beside me which says which things I'm currently designing, which I'm currently developing, which are currently in playtesting, you know, which are waiting to go to the playtest group, which contracts I'm waiting to be signed. I have, and which games need to create sell sheets for, or sizzle reels, like are ready kind of in the marketing stage. I have a tracker spreadsheet which tells me who I've pitched each game to, what the status of it currently is, any feedback that I'm getting from them when I last followed up with them. So a few things that are kind of super powerful from an organizational point of view. And I tend to book out my week at the beginning of the week or at the end of the previous week so that nobody can book time in the next week. So if people want to, like this morning, I've had 2 consultations with new designers or people that I think, you know, people have got ideas for games or been working on games that want a bit of help. And I offer 30 minutes free. But on a Friday, I'm booking out my time for the following week. So nobody, even if they've got my calendar, they won't find any time for free, so that I can plan my week properly on a Monday and know what I'm going to be able to do. And if I need time chunks for different projects, I just put it in my diary. You know, if I'm working on a project for a client or something that's got a deadline, I'm like, right, I need 3 hours on that then.
Right.
I think the other thing is I am not distracted by my email or by social media. I don't have any notifications on my phone or on my computer. I close those things down. I look at my email first thing and then at lunchtime, and I ignore it the rest of the time pretty much. And I try to get to a 0 inbox at the end of the day. I mean, I'm a bit of a weird freak in that way.
No, this is what I'm aspiring to do. And just a few days ago, I actually set a focus thing on my phone so that now I don't see any notifications between 10 and 6. Right. And it's amazing how much more I can focus when my phone isn't buzzing every 2 seconds and I'm checking. Yep. So that's a huge thing that can help a lot. And also, so I've been my own boss for almost 2 years now. It's still pretty new. And I'm still learning how to manage myself. It's a huge learning curve. And there's a lot to learn about how I work best, how I motivate myself, how I get, like, it's just a whole nother aspect to it. And so it's great that you have that experience, having already had a business before now transitioning to being an indie game designer. You can, you know how you work and you have these systems in place. So that's so helpful. Yeah, it's been really helpful. And I appreciate that it's, you know, that it's not the same for everybody. And it's one of the challenges of working for yourself, full stop, whatever you're doing, is, you know, kind of managing your own challenges around, you know, the self-motivation and organization and, you know, getting up out of bed in the morning if you don't have to. If nobody's expecting you to be anywhere, what is it that's getting you out of bed? And I think that for me, it's always been that I've been doing something that I've been very driven to do. And that's kind of key. I mean, it's not the only thing. And I know that even when people have drive, that
they still might struggle to self-organize and to manage themselves and to be motivated to get up and get on with the work. I mean, procrastination is a real problem for lots and lots of people. But I think that so one of the things I found hugely helpful is to think about, to really pay attention to what kind of work gives me energy and what kind of work takes my energy away, starts to sap that, even if it's gradual over time, and to try and cut out all of the stuff that drains me, because those are the things that I'm going to put off. Those are the things that I feel like I ought to do, but I don't really want to do. And some of those you can't get rid of. I mean, like doing your accounts and stuff. You've got to file your taxes. There's no two ways about it. You can't just say, I'm not doing that because it doesn't give me energy, you know, in a sort of namby-pamby way, right? You can't do that, of course, but it's about being aware of the kinds of things that you could do over and over and over again, that you love. Like for me, going to playtesting, spending time with other designers, and doing the kind of the core invention stuff on my own. I could do it over and over and over again. And then the things which I've cut out, like, will you help me write my rule book? No. Will you can you run, you know, I've created a game and I want you to run my Kickstarter because you've done some successful Kickstarters. No, I won't do that. And I'm getting better at working out what it is that I can say no to, so that I've got the time to say yes to the stuff that I want to do, and then become known for that stuff. I mean, it's a really hard thing to do, I think, when you're starting out particularly, and trying to get a name for yourself, to say no to stuff, to work that comes in that will help pay the bills. That's really difficult, because you need the money. And right now, I'll take anything. I'll do anything. But then those things can keep coming in. And then before you know where you are, you're doing that and you want to be doing this. And I think that's difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big thing that happened to me a few years ago, where when I was just getting serious about game design, and I decided to start a playtesting convention in Toronto, which was amazing, but then that took up so much of my time. And I was just like, I want to be designing games, but I'm an event coordinator. Now I'm like, I'm known as an event coordinator. I identify as an event coordinator, and I was an event coordinator during my day job as well. And I was just like, this is not what I want to be doing. I started it because I wanted to have more playtesting opportunities in Toronto, wanted to connect with the design community to ultimately be a game designer. But I'm just like, why am I spending so much time on this thing that's not the true thing, like you said, that gives me energy that I'm passionate about?
Yeah. But it's so easy to do, and we all do it. We all do that. We all say yes to things, because, and for very good reasons. You know, it probably is the best way to get to know other designers in your area, to start a group and to run a convention. I mean, that's full on.
Yeah.
It's enough to me. It's enough for me to run a weekly group with someone else that was already established when I became one of the organizers, and I didn't have to do any of the setup, and people just come. It's enough for that hour on a Friday morning going, we got 16 designers and they all want 4 players and they're all coming for 2 hours. That's a nightmare.
But no, that's really great that you have that community there. And like you said, you have that consistent playtesting group that you can meet with. You can constantly be trying out new ideas. You can also iterate so much faster and bring a game through the full cycle a lot quicker when you have that group.
Yeah, and I've always been aware of how lucky it is, really, that I have access to that. It's a group that has some established people that come almost every week, and because it's during the day, many of those people are doing it as their full-time thing, so they are more experienced. And then because it's in central London, you know, we have people that kind of come semi-regularly, and then we have people that come because they're passing through and they're just spending 3 months in London and they're a game designer from somewhere else. And then we have people to come and test. We always want people to test. I mean, more people to test, please, because then it's not such a headache organizing. But it's a very vibrant group with a lot of different games. It's exciting. You know, each session, we have 3 sessions during the day, and each session we've probably got 3 or 4 different games happening at the same time. So yeah, it's a privilege to be able to attend that, and it's not something that everybody has access to. I mean, I'm lucky. My children are older. My youngest is about to turn 18 next week, so he's, you know, I will no longer be a mother of actual children, but a mother of adults, which is a bit scary. And that gives you a certain flexibility that you just don't have if your children are younger. And because I'm able to do it full time, I'm able to, you know, to go off and do that. I don't have to be at home, and I'm close enough, and I have the flexibility financially to be able to do that too. And those things, each one of them will lock out lots of other people that might, you know, that would also benefit from that. So fortunately, there are, you know, a good amount of online game communities as well, but it's harder for the kind of lighter stuff, I think. You know, the online tabletop simulator is great if you've got a Euro game that you're looking for people to play, and it's less good if you've got a party game or a dexterity game, perhaps. Not very good. Or
not
you
ideal.
know, sometimes it's not ideal. Yeah.
No, I fully agree with that. It's so great that we have these tools now to playtest online, but you definitely miss that you know, key factor that you can't really you know, register online. A sort of intangible thing around the table, body language, just the vibe, the energy, you know, things like that. It's really hard.
You're designing a game to be played in person, and yet you're testing it in a virtual situation, and that will tell you some things. It tells you whether bits of the game are broken. It doesn't tell you what the experience of the players is like, because you can't see them. You can't see if they're pulling out their phone. You can't see when they're disengaged, unless they're very experienced playtesters and they're very aware, self-aware, and they're communicating when they feel engaged and not. It's difficult. Plus, it takes twice as long. So it's not a very good representation of what it will actually be like around the table anyway. But it is better than nothing. And absolutely. You know, you can design. I mean, during the pandemic, we still ran a much smaller Friday playtest where we were specifically designing games that could be played via this situation, Skype or Zoom, and we would email each other the things so we could print out. So we were doing a lot of roll and writes. That's where a lot of the print and plays on my website have come from through COVID, creating games that people can play with friends and family online. If you're doing roll and writes, it's perfect. You know, you've got an online dice that you're rolling, everyone can see it, and you can hold up your sheets if you want to, but you can see everybody and you're just chatting while you're playing. But there are only a few kind of formats that really work like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk a bit more about how, you have transitioned from running your games on Kickstarter, doing the whole self-publishing thing, beginning to end, the fulfillment, distribution, all that stuff. Now you just pitched to publishers. Can you talk more a bit about transitioning from that to where you are now?
So there was a gap, which you would expect, between saying, okay, that's it, I'm done with the self-publishing, and getting any games signed. Because up until that moment of I'm self-publishing, the contacts that I was trying to make were in businesses that I hoped would be able to take these games. I was trying to go a kind of a different route. I was very aware that that there's lots of competition out there, but I was thinking, okay, I'm going to get these games into different places. So I was very much focusing on that, and not very much focusing on establishing a network within the game industry. So I didn't really know any publishers at that point. I knew some designers, but I didn't know any publishers. So there was a big sort of, okay, I've got a learning curve. How am I going to find these people? How does it work? What do you show them? What do you need to have? How can you get to that point where you've got, different things? How do I know what they're looking for? And how do I get to be on the list if people are, they're sending out wish lists and stuff? And the things that helped me get to the point that I am now, with being able to having a lot of contacts and pitching regularly, were being able to go to events like the Mojo Pitch, absolutely brilliant, in London. There is an online virtual Mojo Pitch in July, as well as the in-person one, which is at the end of June. And that they put you in touch with mass market publishers. They interview designers to make sure that you're not just, haven't just made the next version of Monopoly, and that you have some kind of frame of reference of modern games, and that then you're worth the time for the publishers. And then they will set up all your meetings during the pitch. You just say who you want to pitch to. They have a kind of amateur track and a professional track. And if you're on as a professional designer, that you just they send you a list of who's going to be there. They send you all the wish lists of all these companies. You look down them and you say, I want to meet these 30 companies. And they will then send you back your timetable over the day, over the virtual pitch, with pitch meetings for all of those companies. And that has been unbelievably helpful as a new designer, getting some connections within particularly mass market, which is, the kind of games that I normally make. And, I've been going to Essen for years and years as a punter, just transitioning from going to Essen as a punter to going to Essen and forcing myself to ask publishers if they take pitches, and getting contact details, that sort of thing. Asking other designers, this game, who do you think might be interested in it? Which publishers should I get in touch with? That kind of thing has been hugely beneficial. Going to trade shows, like I've just come back from Nuremberg. Nuremberg was the week before last. If you don't know what it is, it's the biggest toy fair in the world. It's 18 halls of it's crazy. It's absolutely enormous. The games are mainly over 2 of those halls, but they're sort of spread out into a couple of others as well. And most of the particular European mass market companies are there, and so you can make connections there as well. And so, for example, when I was at Nuremberg this last week, I did a lot of preparation. I had a lot of meetings booked in, 20 meetings, pitch meetings, and then I had blocks of time where I was going to, and I had a list of the publishers that I knew would be exhibiting that I wanted to make contact with. I would go to them, say who I was, give them a card, ask for their inventor relations person, the name, the email address, the submission process, so that I walk away with a person's email. And that kind of thing is invaluable that you're doing that in person, and that you can, because it's harder for them to say no. If you're there, it's hard for them to say, no, I'm not going to give you that. Than it is for them to ignore an email that just goes through to a website, which is, what happens if you can't go in person. So that's been the transition. But there is a big delay between making any money as well. If you stop self-publishing and then you're trying to develop connections and pitching, then you might get something signed, and then they're developing it. And then finally, one of the first games that I pitched is just this one, roughly, just come out.
Oh, boy.
In fact, I think this is a pre-production copy, so it's not even out yet. But it's a party game. It's one of the first games I pitched. And the company that has published it, they've had it for ages, but that's just the time scale. And so, when my first royalty payments come through, it'll be very exciting. But it could be 4 years between the time when you make the game or make the decision that you're going to pitch to actually seeing anything. Of course, some of the companies give advances, and the mass market companies give good advances, so that helps.
Right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's a necessity for sure. Yeah, because you talk about, the delay in getting royalties and, how it can be, tough to get things going. So what now are all of your different income streams as an indie game designer to keep everything floating?
Yeah. So royalties and advance on royalties and sometimes options. So, if the company's very interested and they don't want you to sign it to anyone else until they've had a good chance to play it, they might option it. Mass market companies tend to do that more than hobby companies, or tend to be bigger financial rewards anyway. So some direct sales from self-published games, but it's a tiny trickle really, because I'm not pushing those things. I don't even put them on social media really. They just sit on my website, and if somebody comes to the website, they might have a look at the shop. I do consultancy for people, so if they want me to do some development or something, I will charge for that. I do commercial design projects for brands and corporations. That's where the big chunks of money come in that aren't royalties. I mean, the thing about royalties is you never know what's going to happen with a game. You don't know if it's going to go whoosh, or more likely it's going to go trickle, 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 stop.
Yeah.
And it's out of your hands. You can't do anything about it as an independent designer, that's licensing it. That's just the way it is. You're not in control. Even if it's a big company, it might not sell well. So maybe it's lovely when something hits and you get a bunch of sales, and that's really exciting. But to make sure you've got a more guaranteed income, then the things that are actually sort of paying regularly are work for companies, so creating games for corporations that want a game for some reason or other, and work for hire. I do for game publishers, so they might ask me to do. I'm just finishing one today. Might ask me to do a project that that they want designed for a particular thing, and I'll do it for them, and I probably won't be credited, and I won't get any royalty, but I will get guaranteed £5,000 or something like that, depending on what the project is. And sometimes that's what's on offer, and sometimes it's more than I would get if it was royalties. So a bit of both helps, I think. And I have had a couple of commissions from board game companies where they're paying a development fee and an advance and then royalties. So that's really nice, because that you're going to get something else. Maybe the royalty is slightly lower, but you're getting a chunk up front. So yeah, it's kind of a mixture of those things.
Yeah, and just thinking about being commissioned to make games for different companies and corporations, that's the big thing that connected me with you, because when I was approached by a brand to make a game for them, this was all new territory for me, and I posted in the Board Game Besties Facebook group about it, being like, I have no idea what to charge for this, like absolutely no idea, like $500, I don't know. And so you responded, and I have here what you wrote. You wrote, "Don't forget that you're not just charging for your time, you're charging for a specialist service. It doesn't matter if it doesn't take long to do. You're an expert and you should be paid as such." And that was such a helpful thing for me. It just and also just gave me a bit more confidence, and, made me feel like, oh yeah, this won't take me very long because of the skills that I've developed to do. So
exactly. Because of your history, the amount of time you've put in up to this point, the amount of time you put in for free up to this point, the passion that you've shown in game design, the kind of the number of times you play other people's games, or all of that is, particularly when we're talking about corporates, that every single bit of expertise is something they do not have. None of them know about board games. You are you have more expertise than you can possibly know until you sit in a room with loads of people who haven't played anything for 20 years and have decided they want a board game. And then you think, well, you know, I really know what I'm talking about. It's, you know, and you definitely should be paid for that, particularly with corporates. I mean, they are paying people, you know, consultancy rates for their expertise. They expect to do that. And just because we don't make much money being board game designers normally doesn't mean we shouldn't be paid as experts in a corporate setting.
Absolutely. No, it's very, very true. And then you meet with them and you have conversations. And when you have these conversations, you realize, oh, wait, yes, things that are obvious to me are not obvious to everyone. And that's the kind of experience.
And to be honest, that's another reason why you should charge properly, not just because you have the expertise, but because they don't. And a lot of what you'll end up doing is teaching and hand-holding that you don't expect or don't have to do in the rest of it. Like when I'm doing something for a games company, I'm not having to spend hours and hours and hours explaining why, you know, we're not just going to, I don't know, knock people out every third turn or something. You know, because they already know all that stuff. They have so much expertise as well if you're working with a game company, and it's something that takes you by surprise as soon as you work with a corporate, that actually you think it's going to take this long to do, and then you don't factor in all of the meetings you're going to have to go to and all of the emails you're going to have to respond to when you say, oh, we just thought we'd take this component out. I mean, like, well, you can't just take a component out of the game that I've designed because that component's there for a reason. The whole thing won't work without this. Now, this has happened to me. It's happened in the most recent project I'm in. Oh yeah, we took all the components out that needed constructing, even though they told me they wanted like things with height. So I put these anyway. I will not go into specifics. No. So, you know, we've just taken all of that out, and people were a bit confused about how to play the game. Oh yeah, I'm not surprised. So you're having to do all these things that you don't expect that you're going to have to do. So you ought to be paid properly for them. I've recently decided, you know, with those corporate things, because they are real work, much more like real work than the rest of it, that I work out how much I'll charge and then I double it.
Yeah. That's essentially
I work out how much you'd be. And I don't charge for my time. You charge for the project, and your expertise is bundled up in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that was, thank you for that. And that was very, very helpful advice.
Well, I'm glad. That's good.
Yeah, no, it all worked out. And I just got a copy was sent to my home in Canada. I'm not there right now, but I saw photos of it, and it's very cool to see a game actually go from idea to finish in just a few months, when we're used to, like you were saying, years and years and years sometimes before you actually get to hold the game in your hands.
Exactly. So, and there's pros and cons of that, because sometimes things get a bit rushed. And that you know, that people sign off on things when they miss out the blind playtesting phase or something dreadful. But yeah, the pros are, you know, oh, we're starting now and you want a game when? I don't think I can design this game from start to finish in 4 weeks. No.
That was my timeline too, is 4 weeks.
4 weeks, exactly. And it's usually 4 weeks. That's what they usually say.
So getting to this point now is really exciting to have another income stream to sort of fill in the gaps between you know, when games are actually signed. So that's really helpful for other people thinking about, you know, if I want to be an independent game designer, how can I make this sustainable and feasible So what other advice would you have for someone who's thinking about trying to do this full time?
It's so difficult to give advice on because of that huge delay between creating games and seeing them pull through into actual income. And it's a bit of a gamble. You know, you don't know whether that will translate into income. Timing is probably everything. I mean, I should say my own journey to do it, journey's a terrible word, my own history has been that I ran an education company, and we sold it, and therefore I had a big payout and I could leave after a certain amount of time. So I had time and I had money in the bank, and that gave me 5 years. I didn't have to earn any money in which to have that pull through come through and to learn the craft properly and to make connections. So so anything I say should be in the context of I've been lucky, or I was in that situation through different circumstances than working a full-time job to get a paycheck and doing hobby gaming in the evenings. It's a bit different. You know, looking at what Matthew Dunstan, the Australian game designer, has done, and he's very helpful because he always every year shares his annual income. If you don't follow him, you should follow him. At the beginning of January, he shares his income from the previous year. He says how much he's got for each game, and then does a sort of review of how well he thinks he's doing, and you know what he hopes will happen in the next year. And he had a point where, because he was doing it as well as a full-time job, as most game designers do, he had a point where he got a series, and he realized that the pull through on this series was going to be enough to sustain him, and that allowed him to make the leap. And so I think that's the reality for a lot of people, is you have to work really, really hard, do 2 jobs, massively, you know, create your name whilst you're doing your day job in all your free time, until you get to the point where you think you can make it work financially. But the other, you know, another way is possibly to go into the development side. So, you know, making connections with publishers so that, you know, you get into some freelance development stuff, which turns into work for hire stuff from a sort of design perspective, and the corporate stuff, because, you know, there's definitely scope there. If it's something that is of interest to people listening, then there's all sorts of companies that might be persuaded to have games that may or may not have thought about that as an option. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons why brands might want a game. They might want it for education purposes, of, you know, to tell people about their brand. They might want it for PR purposes. They might want it for internal training purposes. All sorts of different kinds of games, from little games on coasters that can be promotional items given away that are a bit more engaging and people are less likely to throw away, to full-on big one-day full event training games for 200 people, like I've been doing with Lambda Chi Alpha, the fraternity. And you know, there's all sorts of huge range, and you could create a nice little niche by going off and making connections with corporates and offering those kinds of things. You could even create games that you white label and you know, put different companies' branding on as a sort of starting into that, if you wanted to. So it's definitely, there's more money in that side of things. You just have to be aware of what you're getting yourself into.
And that might be a good place to start, so you actually have some money coming in, which then can sustain you while you pursue pitching to publishers as well.
Exactly. At least you're doing game design stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just so in case anyone doesn't know what we mean when we talk about development work as opposed to design work, would you maybe just explain that in case people don't know the difference?
So someone has designed the game, and either they want help, which isn't as, I mean, usually but I do get those jobs, but they're kind of very few and far between. More usual, they've pitched a game to a publisher. The publisher has said yes, they're taking it on, and then there are corners that need rubbing off. It needs a fresh set of eyes, someone to look at some of the challenges with the game and fit it more into what that publisher wants it to be, because the designer has an idea of what they want when they're creating the game, and then the publisher takes it, and sometimes it fits perfectly and sometimes it doesn't, because the publisher has different things that they want. And so the developer is the person that will help the publisher get it from the initial design to what the publisher wants. I've had because I've done some work for some British companies that were traditionally book publishers, and the Shakespeare game and the Jane Austen game and Roughly have come out of that publisher. In fact, you can see all the games that I've done for them as development on this little shelf here, and so they know me as a designer and have sent stuff, because they often take things from authors, game ideas from authors or artists who aren't game designers. So they need the expertise of a game designer to take what they think is going to be a good idea, that they can see it in their brand because there's beautiful artwork and it fits from a thematic point of view, but the gameplay isn't there yet. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's for, less experienced publishers, or publishers that just don't have their own internal developers, because a lot do, but some of them don't. Some of them outsource that.
Right. Yeah. There you go. Well, I'm just realizing that it's almost been an hour. I've just been enjoying chatting with you so much. I thought this would only take like 20 to 30 minutes, but there's been so much to talk about, and there's so much more.
I'm sorry, I've been chatting probably too much.
No, I just don't want to take up too much of your time. I appreciate you giving us this time out of your schedule to tell us all the really cool. Yeah, you're just up to so many cool things. It's just really inspiring, to be honest, to see someone doing this full time so successfully. And so I know I learned a ton, and I'm sure that a bunch of other people watching learned a lot as well. So thank you so much for joining,
thank
Ellie.
you. It's really good to talk to you.
Yeah, and if there's any other projects or any other things you want to shout out, and also where people can find you online.
Yeah, so I suppose the big one is, well, you can find me on my website, which is thedarkimp.com. Have a look at the blog, new posts every 2 to 3 weeks, and also the new podcast, which is called Behind the Cardboard. It's released on the Game Design Roundtable stream. So they release an episode every other week, and mine are interspersed with that. Behind the Cardboard is a series of discussions between designers. So it's me and another designer in each episode chatting about a different aspect of the business and practicalities of being a board game designer. We're not talking about game design itself. We're not diving into mechanics or, different types of games or how you make them or what works or anything like that. We're not talking about theory. We're talking about practicalities of being a board game designer. So we're talking about pitching, sell sheets, sizzle reels, pitch decks. We're talking about networking, about developing relationships, working with co-designers, all sorts of things around being a game designer, which I don't think gets talked about as much, except in those, those are the questions I'm getting at playtesting and things. Well, how do, what else do I do? If I can learn about the game design stuff, because there's so many channels that help me with that.
Right.
What about, where do I start? What do I do with this thing now? Mm-hmm. So that's what that podcast is about. So that's on the Game Design Roundtable stream.
Yeah. No, I love that. I obviously love talking about the business side of things as well. That's a huge part I find so interesting, because once you get into the design stuff, there's just so many different opinions. It's very subjective, the philosophical, theoretical. I like talking about the nuts and bolts practical things, that everyone can relate to. And you can learn from. So
But I
I'll
think that,
definitely,
that it's about advice. I'm getting experienced designers to give people, the advice that they wish they'd known, really.
right.
So you can walk away from every episode with hopefully a bullet pointed list, if you're bothering to write anything down, of,
Right.
oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to try that, or I'm going to do that, or I never thought of that before, or good tip. So
Yes.
that's the aim with it, really.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that sounds great. So definitely go check that out. I'll link to it below for anyone who's
Thank
interested
you.
as well. So yeah, thank you so much, Ellie. Really
Brilliant.
appreciate you being here, and we'll see you soon.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much, Pam.